Michelle, I have your book too. I feel like I've read your book um, prior to this. Is that crazy?
It is crazy. Did you read 14 Talks by any chance? That was my other book.
No, I was a social worker and a child and youth worker, so I've been in the space for so long, and I consume parenting things
Yeah.
I consume them. So I just find it, this conversation. I knew what you're talking about is making a child success when they have failures. What to say to turn failures into character building moments. And I think that as a parent, it doesn't really come into play until they're teenagers that you see, there's little mistakes and then there's big mistakes. And your latest book is kind of a playbook for anxious parents everywhere in terms of how we can do these things and what we can say. Because so often I think we say the wrong things at the wrong time, and that sticks with them rather than the bigger lesson.
That's
Do you
exactly it. That's the thrust of the whole book, that how we react matters most as to whether your kid's going to get kind of stuck in the muck or they'll be able to grow from it.
And the reason I think your book is so important is because you don't know what you need to say until you're in the moment, and you don't think it'll ever happen. And then when you're reading it, it's almost too late because you're like, oh, I wish I had known this in the moment. And the example I can say is one of my children had come across something he shouldn't have seen on YouTube that was obviously adult content in a kid forum. And he was so scared and ashamed to tell me because he thought he was going to be in trouble. And, when I knew what to say because I had read about it. And rather than being like, don't ever go on YouTube again, banning it, I was able to know what to say. And I think that that's why your book is so important. What do you right now feel parents are afraid of mistakes? Do you think they're like afraid that their kids are going to mess up so massively and not recover? Like, what is this fear of mistakes as parents?
I think that theoretically parents are on board and they understand that, yes, mistakes help us learn. It's how we grow. So I think parents are really good with it for other people. And then when it happens in their own home, they're like, "Oh, but not me, please." It's really scary. And depending on the kind of um, mistake or setback or whatever it may be that their child is experiencing, they can feel some sense of shame or embarrassment. Like, I can't believe my kiddo is the one who posted this, or the one who got caught drinking early, or the one who got suspended, whatever it might be. So, yeah, I really am hoping that we can kind of lift that veil of shame and secrecy and get parents to feel a little bit more comfortable with sort of normal pitfalls of growing up and becoming a young adult.
Are failure and mistakes the same thing?
I love that you asked me that question. So the word failure makes parents itch. They're like,
Yeah.
I don't want to think of it that way. The way that I define it in the book, that it's an experience of failure that leaves a kid feeling detached, incompetent, not accepted, not worthy. So a mistake is,
From who, Michelle? Like from
yeah.
who? From who do they feel that from?
So it sort of depends on how you react. Sometimes it's innate. Sometimes a child has they sort of trend that way where they're hard on themselves. They just come out that way. Sometimes kids are getting that feedback from their parents, and sometimes it's other adults in the community. Parents gossip. They engage in spreading information about teenagers. Oh, that's the kid who we all know. That's the one, right? So, and then they feel it from their peers, but I think mostly adults.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So, obviously, we set the stage very early on because our kids make mistakes right off the get go, or failures or setbacks. When they go to school and they get grades that aren't matching their peers, and they're maybe getting constant setbacks in school because maybe they're not getting the A's or the four pluses or whatever they're trying to get. What are we teaching them? How are we as a parent teaching them that, because we're like, oh, you failed, you didn't do well, you did this, you've got to work harder, like they've done something bad or not worked hard. Like, I feel like there's such mixed messages in how we're parenting from what the world is saying to what we're trying to teach them. How do we cut through that so we can teach them, oh, there's tiny, I think as parents, we think big mistakes, right? Like you did post something really bad, but I feel like there's constant mistakes in their lives that we can show them the lessons in. Yes.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So there are examples in the book that range from the dramatic, which I just gave you a few, to the more subtle, where it just can chip away at a kid's confidence over time. Like you said, maybe they're not getting the same grades as their peers and they're putting in the effort. And so that's incredibly discouraging. And that can be sort of a cumulative feeling that trends towards, wow, am I a failure? Am I screwing up here? In a way that I just can't be like my peers. So in that particular circumstance, I think parents need to be very cautious about how kids are labeling themselves or teachers are labeling kids, or you may be, especially where they're putting an effort. There could be a learning difference. There could be, lots of stuff that's happening neurologically as well as behaviorally. There are lots of distractions.
Hormones.
Yes, of course. By the time you go into middle school and you're juggling multiple classes and you're not used to that, and you're developing a social life, and you're trying to figure out who you are as a person apart from your parents, it's a lot.
And you're getting body hair and all kinds of things you have to deal with that you didn't before.
That's right. So I think we need to reframe our expectations. And my definition of success in the book is not achievement oriented. It's really about developing a sense of community, being able to contribute something of value to your community. That's what makes a kid feel successful. So they may not be a straight A student, but maybe they're contributing in a different way. Maybe their brilliance comes out artistically. Maybe it comes out in some other, fashion. And it's so important to recognize every kid's talent, whether it's showing up academically initially or not.
What are we saying to build their character? Let's just say we have a kid who doesn't make massive mistakes and they are, up until this point, they're 14 and sort of like perfect, which no kid is, but let's just say in your eyes. Because I think all of us want to build resilience. How are we highlighting their mistakes as growth rather than failures, rather than whatever that word is that makes them feel bad about it? If you have a kid who isn't massively making mistakes, like what is the verbiage we're saying, and how can we show them it's okay to make these mistakes because they may be afraid themselves to make them?
That's right. Yes. So we're seeing a big rise in perfectionism, and kids are really working hard to hide their mistakes. So there's this concept called impression management, where we're working really hard to make sure that we're making the best possible impression on all of our various audiences, on our friends, on our parents, on our teachers, that sort of thing. I think it's key that we as parents model what it looks like to screw up, even in small ways, like, I was at work and I said something in a meeting that I shouldn't have said, and I'm embarrassed right now, or even little things. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send that person an email and just say, I'm sorry that I said that about the project you're working on. Here's what I should have said instead. Showing our kids how we handle these minor disturbances is a great way of demonstrating resilience and how we cope. But that said, a lot of times we're not going to know when our kids are making mistakes because they're masking, because they're covering. So I think it's important that we bring our own mistakes out into the light and show them it's okay to talk about these things.
What's the harm if they're afraid to make mistakes? Like, what is the harm in them actually hiding, lying, like being so down on themselves if they make one?
I'm so glad you asked this. So you can imagine that there are sort of three paths that a child can walk in life. There's the easy path where they never make mistakes. They never have a friendship breakup. They make every team they try out for. They have a sweet little romance in high school. It's, perfect. It ends amicably, and they get into the first college of their choice. That's the easy path. And then there's the middle path, which is full of lots of discomfort and pain along the way. Hard breakups, friendship drama, not doing well in school sometimes, all of that stuff. And then there's the third path, which is traumatic. That's where a child is experiencing so much pain and discomfort, it's stunting their growth. Most parents want their kid to be on that first path. It sounds ideal, right? Well, who wouldn't want that lovely life for their child? But you think of it sort of like exercise. If you're working out with 1 pound weights every day, you're never getting stronger. And you need to tear and repair muscle to grow. Kids who don't have experience exercising their discomfort a little bit and figuring out how to tear and repair and become emotionally stronger Boy, they head out of the nest and they do not thrive. They often experience a failure to launch. So we want kids to be on that middle path early on so that when they leave your cozy nest, they have developed some really good coping skills.
I wish every parent could actually embrace what you're saying, because I've been having conversations recently where, some of the schools are also to attribute where it's just too cozy, like it's just too protected. And I also say they have to learn to mistake, because a mistake at 8 is way better than a massive mistake at 18, because they never know how to actually tear and repair. Do we encourage, like, I want my kids to go through things that make them learn how to deal with life, but if they don't experience anything more than just little things, are they going to remain on the first path, or is there a way to put them in the second path so that we can make sure they get those experiences? Like, I think we're also fearful. We don't want something bad to happen, but we also want them to be able to handle life. Like, so how do we balance if they're not getting it naturally? Do we do it for them?
They're probably going to get it naturally. Life is hard. It really is. And things don't go your way all the time. So parents don't need to manufacture difficult circumstances for their kid. But what I will say is I see a lot of times parents, they're so distressed by their child's even minor discomfort that they placate them way too soon instead of letting them see that they can get comfortable with discomfort. A really common example.
I was going to give us an example. So
yes. Here's one I hear all the time. And I hear this from teachers. What do we say when a parent emails us and says, uh-oh, my kid was placed in this class, but all their friends were placed in a different class. And now do I let my child stay in this class where they don't know anyone and they don't have any friends? Could you just scoot them over into Miss So-and-so's class with their best friend or their group of friends? Because that would make them so much more comfortable and I know they'll learn better. That is a wonderful opportunity for that child to develop some strength, to say, okay, I'm going to go into this class where I don't know other kids and know my buddies are in the other class, and I'm going to have to figure out how to smile and say hello and make a new friendship. Wonderful things can come out of that, but it is scary. It is uncomfortable. And those are the times in life that we need to sit back and say, I'm going to watch my kid figure this out.
Oh, I think that's a great way for your child to grow. And that is the same feeling they might get if something bad happens and they have to learn how to navigate. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the situation. It's the feeling we're going after, not necessarily the event.
Totally. Yes. We want them to be able to recognize that they bounce, that when something uncomfortable happens to them, they don't shatter. So maybe at first it's going into a classroom where they don't have a friend. And maybe later it's someone says something in a class, they're in high school and someone says something in a class that they know is insensitive, wrong, racist, whatever. And they have the courage to stand up against that because they know I don't break. I can do the hard things because I've gradually increased my exposure to it over time.
This might be hard, but if you have the answer, I'd love to hear it. What are some other situations where you see parents rescuing where it would have been a really great time for growth? Like, because I think all that can be like, okay.
So, okay, I happen to be really okay with screen time. A lot of parenting people aren't. I'm okay with screens. However, I think there's a time and a place. And I think there are plenty of times where, like, we can placate kids and say, we're going to this restaurant. I'm going to give you this. You can put your earphones in and look at your phone, especially little kids. I'm sort of like, who cares? But as kids get older, I think they need to learn to sit in an environment with people and have adult conversation and be cool with that, even if it's boring. That's sort of the complaint of a kid who has to sit at a table at a restaurant with adults and have a conversation. Well, I don't want to talk about these boring things. Can I just look at my phone or go outside and text my friends? That would be a perfect example of let's stretch that muscle a little bit and get you comfortable with this. Again, that's not condemning parents who say, sometimes I need the phone. But sometimes you don't need it. Sometimes it will be really good to learn to sit there and sit through that.
Okay. What about in terms of, so in school, we let them go to a new class. Is there anything else in school we can do as parents to let them feel uncomfortable? Because really what I hear you saying is failure and mistakes are uncomfortable, and we need to be okay with it, and that makes them okay with it. So are there other things where you see parents stepping in and you're like, oh, you could have really had a good lesson there?
Yeah, so I think a big one, also related to school, but not academic, is trying out for something or playtime. I hear a lot about playtime on teams. My kid, they're great at soccer. I don't know why they're having to sit on the bench. Why do these other kids get more playtime than my kid? A lot of complaining around that. And then, that's, again, I think a perfect example where a kid could learn to advocate for themselves, and they're not going to initially feel comfortable going to the coach and saying, can you tell me why I'm not getting playtime? So a parent might swoop in and say, don't worry, I'll fix this for you. I'll make sure you get more playtime. That's a great example. And then academically, kids who are struggling in a class, there are certain times that a parent needs to step in. But I'd love for the initial reach out to come from the child, to send an email, to go meet with the teacher and figure out what's happening first.
And then I'm assuming also if there's an assignment's late or they didn't get it done, not you emailing them, the teacher, to give a reason, you put it back on the child to figure out how to problem solve that situation.
Ideally, and I will say different kids move at different speeds.
Sure.
So some kids need more modeling, some kids need more hand holding. I have no issue with a parent who says, sit down with me and I'm going to show you how an email like this goes. I love that, because how would a kid know? A kid doesn't know, right? So we need to train them and coach them on this. But there is a sense of accomplishment that comes from you typing it, you putting your own name as the kid at the bottom of the email, you receiving the email back to your inbox instead of to your parents. It gives you a sense of ownership. And so often, what happens with kids if we don't give them that piece of ownership and that ability to take action? They are quickly rendered helpless, and then they can become hopeless. Like, I can't do these things. I need someone to do them for me. And we don't want kids feeling that.
I'm assuming that if you are a parent and you just might not know, you've habitually made their life comfortable because no one wants to see their kid in pain. What are some of the things we can do to be like, oh, I'm rescuing rather than letting them feel uncomfortable? Is there like a cue like something we can do to self-check in and be like, is this something they need to do? Or is there something that we're looking for in terms of being like, let them grow here or save them? Because I think sometimes you don't know which one to do, help or hurt. What are we doing right now?
That's right. So there are two things that I think parents can do that are helpful. The first is ask yourself, am I getting involved here because this is irritating or uncomfortable, potentially painful, either to me or the kid, right? Or am I getting involved here because this is really a situation where my child is in imminent danger? So you're not going to say, oops, you're talking to someone who I think is 35 and a stranger online, but let's just play this out because it's important to make mistakes. You're never going to let your child get in a situation where they are going to experience real danger, right, to their physical or mental health. But if they're in a fight with a friend, this is another common example. You as the parent probably don't need to call the other parent and say, what's going on? Your daughter has been sending my daughter mean texts. That's something a kid can, depending on their age, can generally work through on their own, possibly with coaching from you, possibly with you as a sounding board. I would love to see that. But that's probably not going to be imminent danger for your kiddo. So I would use that as a test.
That is a great one, because I think we don't know if we're helping them or hurting. I think that's probably, everyone doesn't mean to, but you just do. Like, you just do it because you're like, oh, they need my help. Of course I'm going to help you. I don't want you to be hurt, but we don't teach them anything when we do that.
That's right. What they need is your kids need to feel seen, right? They need to feel that you see what they're going through. And so saying to them, this is really hard, and you're doing a really good job of fighting through this really difficult situation. I'm proud of you for that. I see the work you're putting in here, and it's hard, and you're doing it. That's what kids need. They don't need you to email the other mom and fix it for them so they don't feel pain. That doesn't actually take the pain away. What takes the pain away is getting acclimated to pain.
Let's say I've never let my kid make a mistake ever, and they're now 15. Is it too late to teach? Like, is it now you can't just, I'm assuming, step away and be like, you're on your own, good luck with your lifeboat? Like, what is a transition that we've realized Oh my gosh, I've saved them their entire lives. I've emailed every coach, every teacher. I've done everything. I've talked to parents to make their life easier. What do we do?
Yeah, you might startle your kid if you just disappear, right? So I think what you probably have to say what you're going to do, sort of announce it, which, and I would frame it as a positive thing. Like, you're 15 and I've watched you grow up and you are becoming so independent and so capable that I'm going to start transferring more and more responsibilities to you because I see that you can handle it. You're really doing such a nice job here. So, from now on, I think it would be great if you took the initial move on communications with adults. I think you're great at that. If you need help, I am here for you. You could still be training wheels even at age 15 if you need to be, but kids are eager for independence and more freedom. And so if you frame it in that way, I think it's a real positive transition.
Totally agree. It's just so hard, I'm assuming, because it's a habit, I'm assuming. But
Yes.
what's your 3-step approach to any failure? Because I think parents need this one too.
Yep. Okay. So, any face plant, failure, setback, whatever it is that your child is experiencing,
Big or small, big or
big
small, I
or
think
small.
to know
Yep,
too.
big or small, absolutely. Um, can be handled with this 3-step process. So the first is contain. You need to contain the situation that is causing your child to have a feeling of failure. And again, these things aren't actually failures. It just feels like a failure to your child in the moment. So you're going to contain the problem. That could be contain the thing that's coming at your kid. Let's say someone's harassing your child online. Well, you might want to put up some technical boundaries. Like, we're going to put the phone away at certain times, or we're going to block a number, or whatever you might need to do technically. Or if your child is making decisions that are unsafe or dangerous, then you might need to contain the kid. So that could be anything from, like, they're not wearing their helmet when they skateboard down the big hill in your neighborhood, or they're starting to drink on the weekends and they're far too young. So you might have to say, okay, the world's getting awfully big for you. We're going to pump the brakes. You're going to stay in this weekend as we kind of reassess some of the safety things that are going on here. So that's contain. You want to put a tourniquet, stop the bleeding initially. A lot of parents will do contain and go, oh, good, I'm done. I've put a Band-Aid or a tourniquet on and everything's going to get better now. You've only stopped the initial issue. You haven't helped your kid do the tear and repair thing I mentioned earlier, where they get stronger. The only way they can get stronger through this is by taking some action on their own. And there's a menu in the book of things a kid can do if they are in a situation where they are facing a setback or a challenge. So they range from, like, maybe they need to apologize for something they did, and the book teaches them how to give a good apology, teaches you how to teach them. Or maybe they just have a misunderstanding and they need to get better educated on something, or maybe they need to make a reparation. Whatever it is, there's a huge menu of items that they can choose from. That's critical. If they don't take some action on their own, that's when kids start to feel helpless against the feeling of failure. And then the third step is the parent step to take. It's evolve. So we've done contain, resolve, and evolve. Evolve is where you put this behind you. You do not want your kid to think that you constantly see them as this mistake that they made or this challenge that they face. And I often hear this one is difficult for parents when it comes to social stuff in their kids' life. So if your kid is struggling with a friend issue or they're not connecting with their peers, parents will often say, hey, how about that girl Kate in your math class? She seems really nice. Would you like to invite her over? And you're pressing that bruise so that the kid feels like, I guess my mom thinks I can't do this on my own. I don't know how to make friends on my own. You've got to put it behind you and stop asking about it at some point.
Wow, I think that's probably a huge one for parents too. And I know you've been so generous with your time. I think that also, what does it look, how does this translate when your kids are in sports? And I mean, I watch my kids in sports and I see parents on the sidelines literally getting mad at their kids for making mistakes on the field, on the ice, on the stage, whatever they're doing. Can you teach them mistakes if you're mad at them for, can you compartmentalize, like, you can't make a mistake here but you can make a mistake here, and you can't do this but you can do this, or is that too confusing?
I think that what's confusing for kids is when your parent tries to teach you a lesson and they're angry while they try to teach you a lesson. So if you're a parent on the sideline and you're mad at your kid for screwing up in a game and you're yelling at them, Are they really hearing what they could do better next time, or are they formulating their own angry response to you who's not in the game, right? It's very distracting to have someone try to teach you something while they're mad at you. We can all relate to that. No, even in the classroom, no one likes an angry mentor or teacher. So you can absolutely give your kid feedback on areas where they can and should improve. But if you're doing it through a veil of anger, no one's really going to hear that at all. And in terms of sports, I'll tell you what my husband always told our kids growing up, and I love this. He used to say, I was never the best player on the team, so I made sure I was always the best teammate. That was my contribution, and that's how I knew I was always adding value to the team. Kids just want to add value. That's a real feeling of success. So they don't have to score all the points, but if they are a great teammate, that goes a long way.
And they often don't get enough accolades for it. So
that's right.
Parents, we need to make sure we give it to them. Well, where can everyone find you and your menu of things to do and say? And we'll make sure we link it, but where can they go?
Oh, terrific. Okay, so please find me on Instagram. I love Instagram. I'm posting there daily, lots of free, great tidbits for you. So it's just my name, Michelle Icard, Icard. My book is 8 Setbacks That Can Make a Child a Success, and it's available anywhere a book is sold. And then you can find me on Facebook. It's the author and speaker page for my name.
Amazing. And your last name is Icard. So easy to find. And we really thank you so much. I mean, I think all of us have some work to do this weekend.
Hopefully it's enjoyable reading.
I mean, yeah, I think we can all let our kids make a little more mistakes. So yes. Thank you for reminding us and showing us that there is definitely more ways to do this thing and be uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable.
It really is. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it so much.